So you're trying to get your head around a really complicated global picture, where things like social media rules, international politics, and just totally different ways societies work all kind of crash together.
It's a lot to unpack.
Okay, let's do that then. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping right into these intense talks about social media regulation, specifically looking at Brazil.
But to really get the nuances, we need to bring in other perspectives.
Exactly. So we're looking at recent news, info that includes views from China, and then almost like a counterpoint, we'll look at the situation on the ground in Cuba.
And it's fascinating how these three places, Brazil, China, Cuba, each give us such different angles on, managing information in this digital age.
Right. So for this deep dive, the stuff we're looking at includes some commentary on breaking news, a very raw video blog someone made inside Cuba.
Wow, okay.
A news report from Metropolis digging into China's social media censorship, and also a CNN Brazil bit analyzing what it means that President Lula is apparently interested in Chinese know-how on this.
So our mission today really is to sift through all these different bits, pull out the key stuff, and kind of connect the dots for you, give you a clearer picture without, drowning you in details.
Okay, let's get started. So one of the first things that jumps out from the sources is this news about President Lula, they call him Janja in one source.
Oh, right.
Reportedly going to China to find a Chinese specialist.
To advise Brazil on regulating social media.
Which immediately makes you ask, why China? What are they hoping to learn or maybe import from their model?
Good question.
And one of the commentators we looked at actually says, their goal is to show how China does regulate social media as context for why Lula might ask. The key thing there seems to be China really prioritizing state control over, say, individual access or free speech online.
Which is a perfect lead-in to, a completely different situation. Cuba, we've got this segment about a pretty intense vlog from someone there.
Okay.
And the vlogger just opens with, forget everything they told you about Cuba. The truth is disgusting.
Well, that certainly gets your attention, doesn't it?
It really does. And what he describes seems pretty far removed from maybe some romantic ideas people might have about Cuba.
Yeah, he claims, for instance, that regular folks have very little internet access. Maybe none at all.
So right there, the Cuban insight is about what happens when digital access and basic freedoms are just severely restricted, how it impacts daily life.
And it gets tougher. He talks about daily power cuts, government-mandated ones lasting like 4 to 6 hours.
Every day.
Wow. Can you imagine planning your day around that?
No. And he also describes where he is, Central Havana, saying it's in worse shape than a Brazilian favela, mentions garbage everywhere, bad smells.
That definitely clashes with the postcard images.
Then he makes these really serious claims about widespread hunger among the people.
And the money side sounds bleak, too. He says public servants earn about $30 a month.
$30 per month?
Yeah, which works out to just $360 a year.
That's so
hard to fathom.
Those kinds of economic pressures must have huge social effects. And he also claims people face restrictions if they want to leave Cuba. Another limit on freedom.
His overall view is just scathing. He calls Cuba a disgrace, trash. And he really lays into Brazilians who might admire communism from afar, saying they just don't get the reality.
What's powerful is just how raw and personal it feels. He even says the authorities warned him when he arrived, told him not to film in the streets or he'd be arrested.
Just for filming.
Apparently.
Right.
It really shows you the limits on just basic expression.
And there was more trouble, right? He got held at the airport for an hour.
Yeah, just because he was bringing in 2 PlayStation 5 consoles. Gifts, he said, for his nephew back in Brazil.
But they suspected him of planning to sell them.
That seems to be the implication. It just shows this level of government scrutiny over seemingly normal things.
And his travel companion, Aline, she was searched separately.
Yes, and get this, they inspected her Bible, even the notes she'd written inside it. Because apparently bringing books into Cuba is restricted.
Wow. Even personal notes inside a Bible. That level of control is something else.
Controlling not just outside information, but maybe even internal thoughts, beliefs. That's what it suggests.
It's a really dark picture. And the person commenting on this vlog in our sources, that they mentioned that visitors often wait till they're out of Cuba before posting videos like this.
Because they're afraid of being arrested while they're still there?
Exactly.
That fear just speaks volumes, doesn't it, about the climate there. So while Lula's reportedly looking to China for ideas on social media, this view from Cuba shows a society with, well, extreme limits on information and freedom.
Absolutely. Okay, let's pivot now to China itself. We have this Metropol's report that one source breaks down. And the main point is pretty stark. Almost all the Western social media platforms, are censored or just flat out blocked by Xi Jinping's government.
Which is, absolutely critical context for understanding what social media regulation might mean if you're looking at the Chinese model.
Right. The report lists so many familiar names. Facebook blocked since 2009, reportedly because of its potential for organizing people after protests in Xinjiang.
Exactly. Then X, Twitter, also banned since 2009. They saw how it was used in protests elsewhere, like Iran's Green Revolution, and it happened just before the Tiananmen anniversary. Very sensitive timing.
So platforms known for helping people organize dissent.
Yeah.
Clearly a target.
Clearly. YouTube, same story, blocked in 2009 after ethnic conflict videos from Xinjiang surfaced. They wanted control over politically sensitive content.
Even WhatsApp, which we all use constantly here, faces restrictions there since 2017, sometimes blocked completely, especially around political events. Probably because of the message encryption.
Right. That's the likely reason. Yeah. It raises that whole question for any regulation debate. How much access should governments have to private messages?
The list just keeps going. Snapchat's banned censorship and control under the Great Firewall. Pinterest is locked for not following Chinese rules.
And LinkedIn. That was kind of the last big Western one standing, but it shut down its main service there in 2021. Couldn't meet the compliance and censorship demands.
Wow. And platforms built on open discussion, like Reddit, prohibited Discord, blocked because it allows private group chats that aren't easily monitored.
Telegram, known for encryption and activist use, is restricted. Signal, another secure messenger, is banned outright because, well, its security clashes with China's desire to monitor everything.
So how do they actually do all this? The report mentions the Great Firewall, started way back in '98.
Yeah, it's this huge, sophisticated system. Hardware, software, basically designed to filter all internet traffic coming in and going out of China.
Blocking specific sites, specific content.
And monitoring what people do online. Linking activity to facial recognition, location, even national ID cards. It's incredibly comprehensive.
And the official reasons they give?
Well, the report says it's about social control, national security, their definition of it, and also, importantly, promoting their own local platforms.
Like WeChat, Weibo.
Exactly. WeChat, Weibo, Douyin, platforms that are compliant and operate under strict government oversight.
And if someone in China wants to get around these blocks, the report mentions VPNs. Virtual private networks.
Right. VPNs can create an encrypted tunnel, kind of mask your location, let you access blocked sites, but using them in China is risky. The government doesn't like it, and it's partially prohibited.
So not a simple workaround.
Not at all. And finally, that Metropol's report brings up a 2022 UN report, which detailed serious human rights violations against Uyghurs and other Muslim groups in Xinjiang, including, crucially, severe restrictions on their freedom of expression. Just another layer showing the extent of control.
Okay, so that paints a very, very clear picture of the Chinese approach. It's not just regulation, it's comprehensive control.
Exactly, which brings us back to Brazil.
Right, we have this CNN Brazil segment looking at the fallout from Lula mentioning this Chinese expertise idea. The headline alone is telling. Lula's and Janja's statements paralyze social media regulation.
Yeah, suggesting that just talking about looking to China has sort of stalled the debate already happening in Brazil.
The segment has analysis from Carlos Afonso Souza. He's a law professor, director at ITS.
Right. And Susan makes the point that, look, debating platform regulation isn't unique to Brazil. It's global. China's part of that conversation, sure.
He thinks Lula's interest might go beyond just, say, TikTok. Maybe it's broader advice on tech and social media policy for Brazil.
Possibly. But Souza also says the whole regulation debate in Brazil right now is basically frozen.
Frozen? Why?
Well, several things. Congress hasn't been able to agree on a bill. There's a related case waiting for a final decision from the Supreme Court, the STF.
Okay.
And now, he says, the executive branch, Lula, has kind of jumped into the middle of it with this talk about a Chinese expert effectively interfering with the process.
And Souza seems skeptical about what a Chinese expert could actually bring to the table in Brazil, right?
Very skeptical. He questions what contribution they could make, given how complex and different the Brazilian situation is. He even points out that just explaining the Brazilian context, the laws, the culture, the politics to someone from that Chinese system would be a massive job in itself.
Yeah, that really flags the potential disconnect, doesn't it? between China's controlled digital world and Brazil's much more open, if messy, one.
The whole legal and social setup is just worlds apart.
So let's try and pull these threads together. We've got Lula apparently interested in China's model for social media regulation.
But when we actually look at China, based on the Metropol's report, we see a system of intense censorship and control.
And then, as a really stark contrast, we have that vlog from Cuba showing a society with extreme limits on internet, on basic freedoms.
Yeah, that Cuban reality check really highlights the far end of what can happen when expression and information access are heavily suppressed. It makes you think about what protections are absolutely vital in any regulation to stop things going that way.
The contrast is just huge. Brazil, for all its debates, still has a relatively open online space compared to China.
And the fundamental differences in how the governments operate, the individual freedoms people have, the Cuba vlog really drives that home. It raises big questions about whether you can or should even try to apply regulatory ideas from such different systems.
Okay, so here's where it gets really thought-provoking for you, the listener. When you consider these totally different situations, we've looked at Brazil's open debate, China's tight control, Cuba's severe restrictions. What are the absolute core values that should underpin the social media regulation anywhere?
And how can countries maybe learn from each other's experiences, the good and the bad, without just copying systems that might clash with their own fundamental values?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About finding that balance between, say, control and freedom of speech, and recognizing the massive role social media now plays in shaping how we all talk to each other and understand the world. That's definitely some food for thought from this deep dive.